Love Where You Live is brought to you by Pulse of the Great Lakes, the online and print magazine celebrating the Great Lakes Basin region through amazing adventures, stunning photography, high-profile content, and more. Subscribe to our bi-monthly print magazine for automatic entry into our Spend Local Great Lakes giveaways, plus surprise pop-up giveaways you won't want to miss. Because around here, giveaways aren't just prizes. They're a celebration of everything we love about where we live. Subscribe now at GreatLakesPulse.com. Hello, my friends. Welcome back to the Love Where You Live podcast. I hope you all are doing fabulous today. Today, we're turning our focus to Bay City, Michigan, my hometown. Bay City is tucked into the curve of the thumb, a place known for neighborly values and the tagline, a beautiful view of life. But right now, Bay City is facing a moment of reckoning. We're joined by Chris Runberg, Bay City Commissioner representing the 7th Ward and the author of a resolution that's becoming a lightning rod in local politics. Its title, The Resolution Affirming Bay City's Commitment to Local Public Safety Priorities and Jurisdictional Integrity. At its core, this isn't a radical idea. It's basic governance, a simple statement that local law enforcement should remain focused on Bay City's needs, not be deputized into enforcing federal immigration policy, especially under a national administration that has, in many ways, gone rogue and abandoned core constitutional principles. The resolution passed by a narrow 5-4 vote on March 17th, but 2 days later, Bay City's Democratic Mayor Christopher Gerard vetoed it, citing, quote, operational confusion, end quote, and concern that it might appear Bay City was defying federal immigration policy. In truth, the veto reflected something else entirely. Fear. All of this unfolds against the backdrop of the Lake and Riley Act, a law now being used to justify unconstitutional detention and surveillance, violating the 5th and 14th Amendments' guarantees of due process and equal protection. Today, we're diving into the controversy that's engulfed Bay City and asking what kind of city we want to be, as everyone in Michigan should be asking themselves. Let's hear from the man who authored the resolution himself, Commissioner Chris Runberg. Chris, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Tamara.
Absolutely. So before we dive into the meat of this issue, I would like you to share a little bit about yourself. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Okay. So currently, I'm the 7th Ward Commissioner in Bay City, Michigan. Prior to this, I spent some time in the Army, worked in various different roles, leadership roles in telecom, and now I'm in outside sales for my day job. I'm pretty active with different political organizations and efforts throughout the community. And my ward sat vacant for about 7 months before I won out for it. I went up against 4 other candidates, and I took the commission in the 7-1 ruling. So they appointed me. That was on October 7th of last year.
So you're kind of brand new to this.
Yes, I am. Yeah, it's a steep learning curve. Kind of got thrown in the middle of the term to serve out the rest of my previous commissioner's tenure for the rest of their term. And I'm learning on the fly, trial by fire, so to speak.
So tell me what inspired you to draft such a possibly controversial resolution.
Yeah, it was definitely a controversial resolution. I mostly drafted the resolution in response to the shifting political landscape in Washington. Trump returning to the Oval Office, the Republicans controlling both chambers of Congress, and very lopsided in their favor Supreme Court. And it was clear that federal immigration policies were going to become more aggressive and frankly more harmful. So anticipating these policy shifts, I wanted Bay City to proactively assert our values by clearly stating the local resources and law enforcement would not be used for immigration purposes explicitly. That undermines public safety and erodes community trust. I think it's crucial that local government stand firm against policies rooted in fear and division instead of instead commit ourselves to inclusion and public safety and protecting the dignity of all those who call Bay City home. So.
You would think something like inclusion wouldn't be so controversial.
That I and DEI, I took a lot of shaping down and being careful with my language in this resolution to get the support I needed to at least get it passed through the commission.
So, so when Trump came into office, like what the first piece of legislation, one of the only pieces of legislation that was actually passed, was signed into law on January 29th, was the Lake and Riley Act. And I want to talk a little bit about how this inspired this resolution. And in the intro, I mentioned what the Lake and Riley Act was. We had actually had 12 Senate Democrats and 46 House Democrats vote for this bill as well. It's unconstitutional, flat out. It violates the 5th and 14th Amendments, due process and equal protection clause. How did this play a role in the shaping of this resolution?
Well, that was definitely the impetus of getting this formed and pushed through as quickly as I did. Under the Lake and Riley Act, people are able to, if they're detained by law enforcement, their immigration status can be ascertained at the time of detainment. And there's a big difference between being detained and being arrested. When you're detained, you're just being held for questioning, for all of the other processes that go along with the law enforcement encounter. When there's an arrest, there's actually a charge that's being levied, and that's when you get booked and they can actually have your information looked up. What I was afraid of with Lake and Riley was that with people being detained, they could be detained for any reason. Someone doesn't understand the language that they're speaking. It's a foreign language, and they think that they're talking about them or whatever. That might be grounds for them to suspect them of something, or it could be because of the color of their skin or the accent they have or a funny sounding name. And what I didn't want to happen was where neighbors were calling on neighbors for some sort of dispute or profiling reasons, and that being enough to detain the individual and have their immigration status pulled. One thing if you're being arrested or in charge with an actual crime. It's another thing when someone is just suspecting of you with something.
Just because of your name or the color of your skin or your nationality.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
So what are some people argue that this resolution is symbolic rather than practical. So how do you respond to that type of criticism with the shaping of the language in this resolution?
Well, I mean, symbolism is a pretty powerful measure to have. It tells us what we stand for. It lets people know what we're about. But there is teeth to this resolution. While true resolution carries symbolic importance, uh, that clearly communicates our values and priorities. But more practically, this resolution also provided explicit direction to city departments and local law enforcement regarding how to handle federal immigration requests, emphasizing that our officers should not become de facto immigration agents. By setting clear guidelines, we can protect city resources, strengthen community trust, and shield residents from harmful effects that we've seen by local governments elsewhere. The other thing I'd like to say on that is we're already doing this. The measures that are outlined in this resolution are just affirming current practices as policy. So I don't see it as symbolic. I see it as proactive. So it's something to mitigate the harmful effects of what could be coming down the pipeline.
Yeah. Um, Considering some of the rhetoric, I was at the city council meeting the week it was supposed to be voted on originally. Like, it was supposed to be March 3rd. It was supposed to be voted on, and one of the commissioners was absent that evening, and so the vote was moved to March 17th. But I was there on March 3rd, and I was one of those who gave my own personal feedback on this resolution as well, obviously in favor of it. And we were sitting there listening to person after person, one after the other. There were several people that spoke that night. I don't know the number, but it had to be well over a dozen, if not more, people that actually spoke to this. What was disheartening to me, and I think that speaks to why you did, why you crafted this resolution to begin with, was one after the other, the racist dog whistles in the response for the people who are against this resolution. And they didn't give any meat to why they were against this. It was just basically they regurgitated the same old racist dog whistle talking points that immigrants are evil, immigrants are criminals, immigrants are rapists. I would like you to
Agreeing to the
speak
cats
to
and dogs.
Yeah, I would like you to speak to that a little bit on how you have dealt with that with crafting this resolution to begin with, and then after the vote, having passed 5-4 and then Mayor Gerard vetoing it. Tell me, talk to me about that. Talk to me about your feelings about that.
Well, I was relieved when it first got passed 5-4. I knew I had the vote, so it wasn't a surprise to me. I also thought it was somewhat symbolic that we did it on St. Patrick's Day, considering, at least according to 23andMe, I'm about 80% Irish. My ancestors faced things like no Irish need apply when trying to look for work when they first came over. They were depicted as barbarians, as apes, as drunkards. I think most immigrant communities have, in one way or another, dealt with some form of profiling and discrimination coming into it. Uh, and I also unfortunately anticipated the veto, and that was because there was a lot of pressure from people from higher up, from where we're taking our talking point from our leaders. And with the first off, thank you for speaking there, because you're right. We did have about a dozen or so people that spoke highly in favor of it, with I think only 4 detractors that were against it, 3 of which were all in the same household and all had basically the same talking point. What was really unfortunate was seeing all of the fallout on social media, seeing what people were commenting on. Again, it was more of the same racist dog whistles as you were alluding to. But I've been trying to find a silver lining in all of that. And what I've been doing is courteously and firmly uh, engaging with at least the ones that are willing to talk, not just lash out with insults and personal attacks. And I've been using it to really hone my rhetoric and sharpen my arguments. So when I do bring this back up, we will have a much stronger case to make at that point.
Yeah, I was on some of those forums online, especially Facebook, and, my god, Bay City do better, like, honestly. You get on there and I'm very outspoken, obviously, and anybody who listens to me regularly knows this. Anyone who interacts with me regularly knows this about me. I'm not afraid to call anyone out on their shit ever. And I get caught up on those forums sometimes and I become mean and I will admit it. I become mean to these people because, first off, I don't feel like anybody who is blatantly outright racist should be we shouldn't handle them with kid gloves to begin with. They know what they're doing. They know what the hell they're doing. They know what they're saying. But the vitriol, my God, it's what infuriates me about the entire situation that we are in this country right now and this immigration policy, this unconstitutional immigration policy. We're dehumanizing human beings.
Absolutely. I'll also say you are correct. You are correct in your let's call it passion. I recall when you were speaking at the podium, I was trying to give you an additional 2 minutes to speak, but we couldn't get
Yeah.
through to get you to 2 minutes.
Yeah, and then I was just like, Gerard and I aren't friends, I will say that out loud. So,
Well,
and on this podcast.
to piggyback on what you were talking about, I think Gerard really he's also online a lot.
Yeah.
He posted the question to Facebook, so we got everybody and their brother outside of the city limits commenting on it, and of course pulled out all the trolls from the internet to comment on it. And I understand using social media as a finger in the wind to see which direction things are blowing, but I don't think that's speaking directly to your constituents. I don't think that's how you're going to intake their feedback on it and make an informed decision. So it was unfortunate that he had posted it to social media asking for their input. I was pleasantly surprised to see how many people were in favor of it, even when he did that. Unfortunately, that wasn't enough to overcome his reservations about this, and what ultimately wound up being a veto.
Let's talk a little bit more about what role you think fear and political pressure play in this because as I mentioned in the intro, Gerard vetoed this, stating that, quote, could create, quote, operational confusion, end quote, and the perception that Bay City was defying federal policies, which these federal policies, again, fall back to the Lake and Riley Act, which are unconstitutional. So, talk to me about what you think the role fear and political pressure played in this veto.
I mean, fear and political pressure undoubtedly played a role in the opposition that we saw, including from within the commission. In the current political climate, especially given the shift in Washington with the Trump administration back in power and Republicans holding Congress and the Supreme Court, there's understandable concern about political backlash, both politically and publicly. Immigration has become a highly charged issue, often exploited to create division and sow fear. I think some commissioners are worried about perceptions, constituent reactions, or even retaliation from state or federal entities, as you alluded to with Lake and Riley. But in my view, leadership means standing firm on principles, particularly when it's hard. Protecting our community safety and integrity is too important to be compromised by fear or political expediency. That's the I know when I first gave my initial draft, I went through several drafts to get the wording right on it. I engaged with local resources. I engaged with the director of public safety and the city manager to make sure that we were crossing all of our I's and dotting our T's, or however the saying goes. Um, but the feedback I got from the commissioners who voted no on it did were telltale signs that they were caving to pressure. I believe most of the no votes in spirit agree with the resolution, but there is genuine fear that there will be political repercussions either from their constituency um, or more specifically from the federal or state government.
What about local government too? Because Gerard actually posted publicly on his Facebook page, as he does, um, that he was explicitly told that if he did not vote for this, that the people would not support them. And, we have that bridge issue, which, is a whole other conversation, and people outside of this area aren't going to know about that. But Bay City has, outside of Mackinac Bridge, the only toll bridge, which is about a block, and they're charging people $5 to go across it. Um, so he explicitly posted this on his Facebook page that if he did not veto this, that he would not get support for the bridges. Talk to me about your feelings on that if you feel like you can.
Sure, sure. No, I'll be candid about it. So in Bay City, we have 9 commissioners and it's a nonpartisan seat. So we don't have party affiliations with it. But as far as I can tell, all 9 commissioners are more left leaning than right leaning. However, in the greater Bay County area, we only have one Democrat on the county commission. The rest are all Republican. And that's owes in part to the fact of the demographics. We have a lot more rural territory outside of the city limit. Um, what I had a conversation with Mayor Gerard the morning he vetoed the resolution, and he told me outright that he was told by the county commission and surrounding municipalities that they would not support any cooperation on trying to push back against the United Bridge Partners. I guess they're called Bay City Bridge Partners now, but I don't like calling them that. And that's clearly the sticking point. As a commissioner, I can't go a week without hearing multiple times from various residents about the bridges. If I'm out in public and someone sees me, the conversation about the bridges comes up within 10 seconds. So it's very forefront on people's minds. And I do think that the commissioners took their cue from Mayor Gerard in that they, concerned about the bridge issue, don't want to do anything that would jeopardize taking care of our bridges. So getting rid of the tolls or pushing back on price increases, those types of things.
Yeah, that's some next level manipulation, if you ask me. My personal opinion out there on people blatantly stating if you don't pass this, you're not going to get help, or if you don't veto this, you're not going to get help with another issue entirely. That should not be in politics, but unfortunately, that's what politics is these days, right? Which is something that we're fighting as well on
Yeah, they're
that.
constantly threatening holding funding over our heads. Right now, we don't have a representative in the Senate, state Senate. We don't have
Right.
there's a Republican majority in the House and the state level right now, and they just passed HR 19, House Resolution 19, which would prohibit already appropriated funds from being released to local municipalities to enact any sort of legislation that would run counter to the president's immigration policies. Now, the ACLU has put an opinion on that. Um, they believe it unconstitutional both at the federal level as well as our state constitution, because in Michigan we have something called the Home Rule Cities Act, which allows local municipalities. In Michigan, we have something called the Dillon's Rule, which means only cities, not all municipalities, but Bay City being a city, we are allowed to dictate the priority and how our resources are spent, so long as they don't run counter to state or federal law. Now, I'm sure as you've seen in my resolution, and hopefully we'll be able to provide a link to that resolution in the
We
show
will.
notes.
Yep. It'll be in the show notes
It's
for people.
There's carve outs for state and federal law. There's also carve outs for court orders and federal arrest warrants. So this in no way runs counter to law, but as I'm sure the listeners are aware, executive actions and executive orders are not law. That is a direction that the president is directing how agencies within the executive branch are to conduct their behavior. So this, as far as my argument goes, is not going to run counter to HR 19. It won't run afoul with it. And even if it did, HR 19 doesn't really have an enforcement mechanism. The budget and appropriations aren't handled in the subcommittee; they're handled by the House and Congress in general. So I that was a that's kind of a very bookworm. You have to really be a legal nerd to understand how that would play a factor. And I think some of the other commissioners that voted no on it weren't fully confident in their understanding of how HR 19 will not affect us.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and that's an issue as well when you're not really versed on the law with things. Um, I want to also talk about, when I got up and spoke about the resolution, I actually brought up crime in Bay City and how the police force in Bay City currently struggle with crime and dealing with crime in our city, and they don't need to be worrying about federal issues and using our resources for federal immigration issues. Crime in Bay City is high. I recently wrote an article on this as well, for Pulse of the Great Lakes, and I have some statistics in there that they were even alarming to me. And I'm pretty up to speed on a lot of this stuff and a lot of the statistics of this area. But crime in Bay City is pretty significant. So how did that, and I'm assuming a bit about this with the crafting of this resolution, but how did that play a role in crafting of the resolution as well, the current crime rates in Bay City?
Sure. So yeah, we do have higher than usual crime currently. I do get every couple of weeks I get a report from the city that shows the percentage of increase in various types of crime. In fact, we just had our fourth homicide in the past 12 months, which is unheard of in Bay City's history, save for maybe back in Hell's Half Mile days during the lumber baron days, probably the last time we had that level of crime. But I believe this resolution aligns directly with strengthening public safety. It preserves and enhances the trust between our police department and the community. Effective policing relies heavily on community cooperation. People need to feel safe reporting crimes, serving as witnesses, or collaborating with law enforcement. When local agencies are perceived as extensions of ICE, immigration enforcement, entire segments of the community withdraw from engagement, which can leave crimes unreported and communities honestly more vulnerable. The resolution aims precisely at preventing that breakdown in trust by explicitly affirming that local resources won't be diverted toward federal immigration actions. We ensure everyone in Bay City feels safe and empowered to collaborate with law enforcement. Uh, so I think, in fact, it does directly relate to that, and it enhances public safety. And study after study done across the country has shown that too, that these so-called welcoming or sanctuary cities, which there are cities in Michigan that are far more stringent in their ordinances and verbiage than what I propose. They actually have seen decreases in crime because people are willing to communicate with law enforcement. I mean, picture if you're somebody, whether documented or not, if you could be perceived or have the suspicion of being undocumented, that's going to put a chilling effect on your ability to work with law enforcement, serving as a witness, etc. So I think this resolution would have given them legal cover to feel safe and engaging with public safety.
Yeah, and how do you think, what message do you think this resolution sends to immigrants in our community? I don't think we have a high immigrant community here in Bay City anyway. Do I, or am I not up to speed on that?
Well, so in my day job, because the commission's only part-time work, even though it takes up 30 hours of my week, uh, I work for a big box home improvement retailer in the construction industry. And we do work with a sizable amount of the Hispanic population in the construction trades. And then if you recall last fall, it was October or November, I believe, we had a busload of migrants on an H-1B visa that came to Bay City because we were the closest municipality that happened to have enough lodging put up by all of the farmhand workers that they were in the state working on. And my email box, my phone was just blowing up because people were thinking it was Governor Abbott from Texas that was busing migrants up to Bay City.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, and there was borderline threats of lynch mobs with some of the vitriol that was going on social media. So this, while we don't have a sizable migrant population like some bigger urban centers do, I believe that most are keeping their heads down right now because they don't want to draw any attention to them. We're seeing across the country stories of people with no criminal record. We're seeing, we got Mahmoud Khalil, who's here as
He's a
a permanent
resident.
resident.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this chilling effect, and it's been stated by Tom Homan, the border czar under the Trump administration, that they're hoping people will deport themselves out of fear. So they're not mincing any words. They explicitly want to induce as much fear as possible. This resolution would have helped provide some cover, not just legal cover, but also some assurances to our immigrant population that we do have, that they don't need to close their blinds and hide in a dark home somewhere. They could still be out fully engaged members of this community.
What about the residents who support federal immigration enforcement at the local level? They seem to have the loudest voices in all of this, or they're the ones that get to, we hear their voices the loudest, rather. What do you say to those residents who are misinterpreting what this resolution is and are basically just falling back to racism and flat out racism?
Yeah, this resolution, I do get the feeling that most of the opponents of the resolution haven't actually read the text of the resolution. It's
I
admittedly a
can
bit,
say that.
yeah,
I had a dude on Facebook that I was going back and forth with, and he literally did not read the resolution. And he said, "Well, I'm sure the mayor did." I'm like, "Did you? How can you have an opinion on this if you didn't read this?" And he didn't read it. And so I sent him a link to the article so he could read it, which has a link to the resolution as well. So yeah, people are not reading this and are commenting on it and are reading a headline or a sound bite and thinking that they know exactly what this is.
yeah. It doesn't help that the media had framed it. Originally, they were trying to frame it as a sanctuary city, and there is a difference between a sanctuary city and a welcoming city. A sanctuary city actively uh, prohibits cooperation with the federal government. This resolution doesn't do that. This is more akin to a welcoming city resolution. My lack of experience with media allowed them to get some sound bites from me during my various interviews. And as you know, with media consumption in today's world, people are in their own little echo chambers. If you're watching Fox News, Newsmax, or One America's Voice, you're going to have one opinion on it. And if you're watching MSNBC or Young Turks or something like that, you're going to have a separate opinion on it. I think it's important that people cross pollinate their media sources, but we don't have that, and that's a reality. I think it's pretty obvious. What I'd say is I do understand why some residents feel strongly about supporting federal immigration enforcement at the local level. They're concerned about safety, law, and order. However, it's essential to recognize that when local law enforcement is asked to carry out federal immigration duties, our community actually becomes less safe, as we were discussing. People fearing deportation become reluctant to report crimes and engage with the police, leaving crimes unsolved and criminals free to continue harming the community. My focus is solely on preserving the integrity and public safety resources and ensuring police can effectively do their jobs to maintain community atmosphere on trust, not fear. Immigration enforcement is a federal responsibility. It's within their jurisdiction. The state doesn't have any laws on the books regarding immigration. That's something that our officers are, one, not trained on, leading to the potential for litigation against us should we have wrongful detainment suit. Um, and the other is we just don't have the resources to do it. In Bay City, we don't call them police officers, we call them public safety officers, because in addition to police responsibilities, they're also expected to be firefighters and first responders.
Right. That's a good point to
Right.
make, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. So as it stands right now, 6 of our officers are not out on the street. They're right now co-op by the federal government to the FBI. The FBI covers their overtime, but doesn't cover their anything that's not overtime. So we're still paying for these officers, even though they're being used for federal law enforcement responsibilities.
What is that they're co-opted to the FBI? What is that about?
They work with drug enforcement, organized crime, organized retail fraud, organized uh, drug trafficking, those types of things. But when they're doing that, they're obviously not in a squad car responding to calls. So
And
they
we're still paying for them.
correct. Yep. The federal government only pays for the overtime.
Wow. That's an argument right there on why this resolution is so damn important.
Yeah, over I think it's 51% of our budget as a city goes to paying for public safety officers. So
Wow.
if people want to look where we need to save some money, that's the first spot I would look.
Yeah, that's a significant amount of a city budget for a town of 32,000 where 1 in 4 people are 60 and over. That's that's pretty significant, I think. It's such an important point to make. Thank you for that. So, the resolution passed 5-4. 2 days later, Gerard vetoed it. What are the next steps? Because this is not done. Explain that to us.
Right.
Walk us through that.
So I have to rewrite the resolution. I can't resubmit the same resolution after it fails. I don't have to change it significantly, but it does have to be substantial enough to at least give it a different title. Um, Now where I'm at is I want to build throughout the community, dispel misconceptions about it. I want to start giving presentations explaining exactly what this resolution covers. And if I may have to wait until after the midterms to reintroduce this, only because I'm expecting there to be a bit of a blue wave that happens and pushback to Doge and the onslaught of executive orders and actions that we've been having to face.
If we make it that
So
far.
if we make it that far, I know I just read this morning that the president had signed an executive order requiring proof of citizenship to register to vote,
Yeah.
which is going to disenfranchise millions of people.
That's what they're trying to. I mean, they already purged 3.5 million from the polls. There's the Election Truth Alliance with the data manipulation, the vote manipulation, and now this coming out. They're doing their damnedest to make sure people cannot vote in this country unless they vote for them.
So yeah, Doge actually just got access to the voter rolls, or is about to get access to the voter rolls. And the thing about those voter rolls is maybe the person wasn't a naturalized citizen at the time they were put on the system for the state, and that has since changed. If they do a purge of the voter rolls, those people will be taken off of it, even though they are legally able to vote in the United States. But
And there are
as
lots
far
of
as
citizens that were they were purged, like U.S. citizens that were purged.
and a lot of that's just clerical error when whoever was typing their information into the computer forgot something or missed something, and it wound up flagging them to be removed. And as we know, things like Doge are using artificial intelligence to go through this, and artificial intelligence is also prone to making mistakes.
It sure is.
It's a helpful tool, but it's just a tool. So I do plan on reintroducing this, but I do want to get the political climate taken care of first. Well, during the voting on this for the first day of it, Commissioner Hilliker wanted to refer it to staff to see what the total impact of our federal and state dollars could potentially be. So I'm going to first write a resolution that evaluates that to understand where we're at with our funding. I then plan on giving presentations on why this resolution or one like it would not jeopardize those funds. And then I plan on doing community town halls to try to work with people who actually live within the city limits to get them on board with it. And then if it comes down to it, like I said, following the midterms, depending on the results of that, if it goes the way I'm expecting, this will be the first order of business.
How long is your term as a commissioner?
Yep. So mine expires. I'm only serving out the remainder of the previous commissioner for the 7th Ward's term. So I am up for reelection on November of next year. My
Okay.
term runs through December of next year. And I'm only allowed to run for one more 4-year term because I served more than 2 years of this term, so it counts as a term. And we have a 2-term limit. Then you have to take a 4-year break, and then you can come back again if you want. but I do plan on continuing my political career, and I will serve 4 more years if the residents will have me, and I will then go from there.
Excellent. Excellent. Do you have any closing thoughts regarding this?
Yeah, I do. Ultimately, this resolution is about who we are as a city and what values we choose to uphold. Bay City has always been a community built on trust, inclusion, and neighborliness, or neighborliness, tough word to say. And that's exactly what we must protect. Despite the setbacks we faced, I remain committed to ensuring our policies reflect these core principles. We can't let fear guide our decisions. Instead, let's commit ourselves to building a stronger, safer, more compassionate community for everyone that calls Bay City home. Where I did find an interesting figure that when my ancestors first settled in Bay City in 1834, we were the minority population. White people were. Uh, I believe the 2020 census data says that 89.6% of our community identifies as white now. There's a big flip in those demographics. And I believe that we're stronger together. It's time and time again been shown that communities thrive the more diversity they have. We have things like the St. Stan's Fair, which is a Polish celebration in Bay City. We have St. Patrick's Day parade and all the festivities that go around that in Bay City that draw in thousands from around the surrounding region. And I believe that these are the things that make up the fabric of our community. And that's what this resolution does, is ensure that we can continue to be that thriving cultural hub of the region.
Yeah, I think it brings up the question that everybody in Bay City, every resident of Bay City needs to ask themselves. Do we want to be a city that leads with fear, or do we want to be a city that leads with integrity? I think it's as simple as
Absolutely.
that. I truly do. I know what I choose. I know what you choose
Yeah.
for sure. Fear leads us nowhere. Pardon me. Fear leads us nowhere. Nowhere, nowhere.
No, it takes having a backbone.
Yeah, no doubt. Thanks for joining me today, and we will have a link in the show notes to the resolution, the current as it currently is or as it was passed, in the show notes. And Chris, how can people find you? Do you want me to put your information out there? How can people
Yeah,
find
yeah.
you?
Put up all my socials. I'm most active on Facebook still, unfortunately. And then, of course, you can also give a link to my email address and phone number, which is listed on the city's webpage.
Okay. Yeah, there's one thing I want to note too. I want to close this with this because I think this was a pretty I think it was a pretty awful thing. A couple of residents, on Facebook put your home address. And to me, they were basically inviting violence to you. That's how I look at it because of the wording of what they were doing as well. And some of these people have fake accounts. They're hiding behind fake accounts, and not showing their faces, and quite flat out being cowards with all of this. So Bay City, do better, do and be better. We're better than this. And if you're not, keep your mouth shut.
For the
I'll
record, I
say.
now have security cameras up all around the property. So, yes, myself and the other yes votes on the resolution were all docked. And I have had some very threatening messages sent my way. But it's all fuel for the fire. It just makes
Yeah,
me want to do that much more. If I'm striking a nerve, I must be onto a topic that needs to be talked about. The last plug I'd put on here too is follow my Substack. I'll get you that so it's in the show notes, because I do comment on both the happenings of the commission and our broader political philosophy. It's called Political Neophyte Goes to City Hall is the name of the blog. Um, for anyone that's interested in how the machinations of local government work, it's an excellent resource, and I encourage dialogue to be continued there.
absolutely. Yeah. I think everybody needs to read that because everyone needs to know how things work. It's such an important thing to understand. We think we know everything and we don't. None of us do. All of us are always learning. So, again, okay, great. Thanks, Chris. Thank you so much. In Bay
Hey, thanks,
City,
Tamara.
integrity over fear. Integrity over fear. We are better than this.
Absolutely.
Do you love our podcast and online content? Then you'll love our bi-monthly print magazine even more. We offer amazing adventures, stunning photography, high-profile content you'll be hard-pressed to find anywhere else. Plus, you receive automatic entry into our Spend Local Great Lakes and surprise pop-up giveaways with Made in the Great Lakes goodie boxes and other prizes that are a celebration of everything we love about where we live. Subscribe today at GreatLakesPulse.com.